ASIST is a suicide first aid workshop. It teaches participants to recognise when someone may have thoughts of suicide and to work with them to create a plan that will support their immediate safety. Since its development in 1983, ASIST has regularly updated its training to reflect improvements in knowledge and practice. And amazingly, over 1 million people have taken the workshop. Studies reveal that ASIST helps reduce suicidal feelings in those at risk and is a cost-effective way to help address the problem of suicide. And that problem obviously is very dramatic in New Zealand. There's been a 10% increase in the suicide numbers each year for the last 2 years at least, and the total is now at 660. So here to tell us about the benefits of ASIST and how it works with people feeling suicidal is Kate Godwood, a self-employed educator and collaborator. So welcome, Kate, to take it from us. Whereabouts are you at the moment? You're on mobile, I know that, but whereabouts in the country?
Kia ora. I'm actually in Auckland. I'm waiting for a plane at the moment, so and I'm flying down to Dunedin.
How about giving us some background on your roles in mental health?
Oh, sure. Okay. So I started out as a group facilitator working with people with mental health experience in the community. And that was a great time. It was in 2001 that I started working in the sector. And it was during the whole sort of recovery revival and lots of really interesting things were happening. So we had the Charles Rapp Strength Model coming through and the Mary Ellen Rapp plan, all of that stuff was sort of bedding itself in New Zealand, and I was really, really lucky to be trained by both Charlie and Mary Ellen to be a facilitator in both of their programs. So that kind of set me on my journey as a trainer or a facilitator, I guess. And I did some really interesting work working with clients in the community, but also bringing in people who didn't have mental health or lived experience into the group work that we were doing, and there was no advertising about mental health. It was just about people being together with a common goal, whatever that task may have been. And it was great. It was a really interesting time. And then I flipped into doing some work in the family violence sector, and so I was doing community training, how to sort of help people to be more effective helpers with people who are experiencing intimate partner violence and or exposure to violence. And that was a really hard sell. That was back in the beginning when the It's Not Okay campaign had just started, and getting people really engaged in this community issue was hard. But, you look at us now, 15 years later, and it's an amazing shift. And then I moved into working with people online with the National Depression Initiative, so that's the John Kirwan stuff. I was really privileged to be able to do some brief intervention work with young people, so that's using text and email, and also with adults, and obviously suicide was an issue that came up a lot for people. And then I started working as a trainer in the field of suicide and was the National Suicide Prevention Manager for Lifeline for a number of years. So that's kind of...
Wow.
I kind of fell into this work, but it was, it's been an amazing journey.
You fell into it. Was there any reason that you chose mental health?
So my mother had always worked in mental health. My family has experience with mental health, and I had my own personal journey in that. And it kind of made sense to me trying to understand what it was all about, why the world was like it was, and I guess that's kind of what attracted me to it. And I love people, and it's a very human experience to have human emotions and experience mental distress.
And you want to keep them alive?
Of course, yeah. Absolutely.
And this training program ASIST is really essentially, I suppose, a suicide prevention initiative.
Yes, it is part of the suicide prevention plan around, educating people who work on the front line to be more ready, willing and able to help somebody with thoughts of suicide, absolutely.
Well, I promoted it as a result of you sending an email offering the ASIST program to people at Framework, and I pushed that out to all of the Framework Services staff, and I believe one or two picked it up, and one of them particularly was very enthusiastic about the 2-day workshop and found it very, very helpful, with some of the clients that she works with.
Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that, Sheldon. It's always good to hear feedback from people and their experience of the workshop.
Yeah. Well, on your website it says that ASIST has helped over 1 million people in New Zealand since it started in 1983. That's very significant.
Yeah, it's trained over 1 million people. That's worldwide. It's not just in New Zealand. I think when the last figures I remember seeing, we had trained somewhere around the 1,000, maybe 1,500 people.
Oh, yeah. In New Zealand? In
New Zealand, yeah.
So this is an international initiative?
It is. So it's part of an organisation called Living World. Yeah, I think for me the biggest growing I had was around my own mental health journey, as opposed to working in mental health and working with people. You have to be quite resilient to do that because people have so many struggles, and it certainly does open your heart. Absolutely, don't get me wrong, but I don't think for me personally, I think the best learning I got was through my own experience facing it. Facing mental health struggles and mental distress, facing those on my own.
Right, working in mental health has been helpful to your own personal experiences?
It certainly meant that I knew the pathways, but it didn't help with reaching out because obviously there's a lot of self-stigma that sits there and then societal stigma. So breaking through all of that stuff, I knew that I needed support and help, and I wanted to reach out for help, and I knew how to do that, but that wasn't necessarily just an easy step change.
So was it stigma and self-stigma that prevented you?
Absolutely. And, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so open about it, because I know that that stigma exists and it shouldn't, because people should be able to reach out and we should be able to reach out to others without feeling ashamed.
Well, that stigma and discrimination, of course, you were involved with Like Minds fairly intensely, and it's Like Minds' claim that that's a major barrier to people getting well. But what role do you think stigma and discrimination plays in suicide?
Well, I think that we talk a lot about resilience. And building resilience with people, and I absolutely think that we need to continue to do that, and that has a place. One of the things that we don't recognise enough is that it's hard to continue to build resilience when you're facing discrimination on different levels every day.
Right.
And in actual fact, we as a community and as a society need to change the way that we respond to people who need help. As opposed to the opposite of that, which is that the person themselves needs to reach out for help. They need to be doing all the legwork. So I think that it has a major role to play, and people are suffering on multiple levels of discrimination and stigma, and resilience is not going to be enough to get them through it all the time.
So
it's a big ask.
What does your ASIST suicide first aid trainings say about it? Sounds as though resilience is a major plank of supporting people that may be at risk of suicide.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So getting people to cope and use their own internal coping skills is really, really important when you're wanting to increase safety. So that's definitely a part of what we call the safety plan, if you like, or the coping plan that we do at the end of the framework. But it's the bits in the front and in the middle that are really important that I think sometimes we lose as humans, and that is the reaching out and then the really truly listening hearing what somebody has to say without having to get into deep therapeutic work unless you have those skills, obviously. But it's that kind of, and I know this from my own experience, I know the magic of having people who really hear you and are willing to stand beside you and help you move to another place.
One of the ironies, Kate, to me in mental health is that there are a large number of people working in mental health who have no idea about listening.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got people all over the place who have no idea about listening, truly connecting, like really, truly connecting with another human being. And there are so many different factors that come into that, and a lot of it has to do with time, and also because people are very sort of singular in their idea of what their role is. And I get that because they're funded to do that, or that's what their job prescription says. And we kind of forget the humanness of every interaction that we have with others.
But if we're working in mental health and we're there to support, then surely listening is one of the crucial assets that you bring to the person who is at risk.
Oh, I agree completely. And that's kind of what we have to retrain people to do when we're looking at the ASIST program. So when people come in, we spend a lot of time on those micro skills. How do you listen? How is it that you actually hear a person and allow them to see that you're hearing them?
So this is one of the focus of ASIST, is it? You said those upfront things that you address with people right at the start of the training.
Yeah, so one of the barriers to being an effective helper is our own attitude. Often people will know what to do, they'll often know what to do, but the reason why it's so difficult to actually implement the doing is because of their own internal dialogue or their own attitudes and beliefs around the topic of suicide, for example. And what we do in the beginning of ASIST is we talk about that. We talk about what are your beliefs and attitudes, and they're not right or wrong. They are you, and based on your experience, that we have to become aware of them so that we can put them aside when we're actually dealing with somebody who has a need that needs to be met.
Take it from us on 104.6 Planet FM.
And I'm host Sheldon Brown with technician Declan Curran, and Mental Health Radio Take It From Us is brought to you and funded by Framework Trust. Now today we're talking to Kate Godwood, who's waiting out at Auckland Airport to catch a flight to Dunedin. She's a self-employed educator and collaborator with a suicide first aid training program called ASIST. That's ASIST. So we were talking about some of the values or some of the attitudes, I suppose is more correct, that people who come to attend your training program, some of the attitudes that they bring with them. Are you able to talk about some of those attitudes that may be helpful or may be barriers to helping people that are suicidal?
Yeah, so sometimes people have a value that has come in that there isn't really much you can do, which is completely untrue because suicide is preventable. But that is sometimes a message that we can get when we're growing up that, oh, well, these things happen, there's not a lot you can do. So that's one attitude. Another is, and I just want to say that some people's attitudes can be, they're only barriers to effective helping if they get in the way of what the person with thoughts of suicide has in terms of their needs. So there may
just
be
pass that one by. Just pass that one by me again.
So they're only a barrier. An attitude can only be a barrier if they get in the way of helping the person with thoughts of suicide. So you can use your attitude, which because the person with thoughts may hold the same attitude about suicide. Right. For example, they might feel that for whatever reason, for their religious or spiritual reasons, that it is against their beliefs. And that in itself is an attitude that many people can have. And if you as a helper happen to hold that same attitude, then it's an opportunity for you and the person with thoughts who also has the same attitude to have a dialogue around that, because there's a struggle there, isn't there? The struggle is that I have this belief, but yet I still feel compelled to want to do this. And then having that opens a doorway for discussion around, what's led somebody to this place where they'll be thinking about this. And it may be a potential protective factor for the person. It may not, but it's being aware of your own attitude and how they might be helpful in an intervention and how they might actually hinder an intervention.
I mean, you've mentioned what might be leading to somebody wanting to take their life. Do you have insights as a result of being involved in this training from people who are trying to support those people that want to end it all? Do you have insights as to what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, I do. Some of the challenges are around hearing the story. So sometimes, often when people come back to an idea over and over, it's because the need's not being met. And it's about slowing things down. Sometimes we need to slow things down. Where am I stepping too fast as a helper, trying to get this person maybe to a safety plan, when in actual fact what's required here is to hear some story, to really engage with this person or get somebody involved at that level that can really work with them around their reoccurring thoughts. So sometimes that doesn't happen. And I've seen that a lot with people really struggling as helpers. How do I get people engaged? How do I get them to move beyond this into a zone where recovery is part of the picture? So for me, when people revisit that, I have to remind people, well, what's not being met? What is it that's not happening in this first part that we can relook at? So we need to slow things down a bit.
I mean, there are quite a few things for those people with lived experience and those that may be suicidal where needs are not being met. There's, it's very difficult to acquire good quality accommodation and housing these days.
I know.
The cost of living is becoming pretty intense. And if you're on a benefit, are these some of the things, the sort of desperation that people face?
Absolutely, Sheldon. And, if we're going to be real about this, I acknowledge that training is only beneficial to people working in the front line who are going to be working with people. But this is not the panacea. It has to be multi-pronged. We have to address these real dire situations that people find themselves in where they're pushed to the edge. Exactly what you've mentioned, poverty, housing, just life issues that are becoming so untenable.
I mean, you worked for Lifeline for quite a period of time. Lifeline had an item on the news, on 3 News last night, saying that they're, in anticipation of these sort of crises over Christmas, they are enlarging their staff, I think, quite dramatically. I mean, it sort of is ironic, isn't it, that Christmas can be joyous for many, but for those people who maybe don't have family, they don't have a budget to be able to spend money without too much thought, at a time when people have got to be vigilant, those supporters have got to be vigilant about those they are supporting and looking out for? Absolutely, we do need to be vigilant. And then, when we take off our worker hat, we then also need to be vigilant in our neighbourhoods. There will be people on our streets that will not be participating in the same sort of activities that we are, and maybe we need to reach out a hand. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's happening? I mean, to some extent, community is a rare thing in some ways in New Zealand these days. We're also me, and intent on getting on and doing our own thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Community is not what it used to be, especially when I was growing up.
Is this what you say in your ASIST training, that it's necessary to change the way we behave?
Yeah, definitely. We do. We need to slow things down. I mean, people are really good at identifying in the training of all the things that, where there are gaps and where we could be better. But then we get into situations that are sometimes beyond our control, like the places that we work for, and all that goes out the window. All of the stuff, the good stuff that we know about, can go out the window because of time pressures and all sorts of other things. The system's not designed for us to behave in this way. I mean, look at Parliament. I mean, they're having a bullying, I find that so fascinating that they are now having, the investigation around bullying. I mean, that's kind of a little barometer of what's really happening in our community.
Well, I guess it's fair to say that bullying is pretty rife in mental health as well, and particularly in our acute mental health services, or even in our community mental health centres. That surprises and bewilders me. I don't see how you can achieve a empathetic, caring and recovery atmosphere if there's bullying going on.